Want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on the show? Or do you have a story that you'd like to submit for one of our Listener Stories episodes? You can get in touch with the show via the website at www.hauntedukpodcast.com, on Instagram at hauntedukpodcast, on X at hauntedukpod, or you can email us at contactus@hauntedukpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and TikTok. And if you want to support the show, you can do it via either Patreon or Ko-fi. Both platforms have exactly the same content, but work in slightly different ways. One of the advantages of Patreon is its sleek user interface, but if you want to avoid those pesky additional charges Apple, Google, and Patreon apply to your subscription, then why not give Ko-fi a try? Simply open a browser window and type ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast. That's Ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast, and you'll soon find us. Whichever platform you choose, we're sure you'll enjoy the bonus content. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to Talk Haunts, Loyd Auerbach, Professor Paranormal himself. You are, of course, a world-renowned parapsychologist with 45 years of experience investigating the paranormal and over 40 years teaching courses in parapsychology. You're the director of the Office of Paranormal Investigations, president of the Forever Family Foundation, and president of the board of directors of the Rhine Research Center, where you teach online parapsychology courses as well as being a prolific author and co-author of many titles, such as A Paranormal Casebook, ESP Wars, East and West, and Psychic Dreaming, alongside many other notable works, including fiction. You can be regularly seen as well on episodes of The Unexplained with William Shatner, Surviving Death on Netflix, as well as a number of other shows on various platforms. With all that said, and with your wealth of experience, we are extremely happy to have you on today to discuss all things paranormal. Thank you, Loyd.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Let's kick this off straight away by, if you could tell us how you got into the paranormal and especially how you came to be known as Professor Paranormal.
Well, I've been interested in this subject since psychic phenomena in general, since I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was influenced from television, comic books, science fiction, all of that. And I was also very much interested in folklore and science, astronomy, geology as a kid. So when I heard the word parapsychology on a TV show called Dark Shadows, I decided to go to the library and see about getting books on parapsychology as well as vampires and werewolves, because that's what Dark Shadows was about.
Yeah.
In the Dewey Decimal System in the libraries here, same section, unfortunately, for parapsychology. So I was about 12 or 13 years old. I started reading books by J.B. Rhine and J.G. Pratt and Gertrude Schmeiler. In other words, the actual science books on parapsychology.
Okay.
I was very fortunate to be able to start a parapsychology club in my high school, meet some New York area parapsychologists. I grew up in the New York area. Some kind of people who eventually became sort of my colleagues or mentors in some respects. And when I was in college, I was able to meet and take a mini course from John Bisaha and Brenda Dunn, who were teaching a course on parapsychology at Mundelein College while I was at Northwestern. Timing-wise, there was a new parapsychology master's program at John F. Kennedy University.
All right.
So I went on and got my master's in parapsychology, and after that, ended up working first at the American Society for Psychical Research, and then back at JFK University here in California. So I've been out here in California again since 1983.
Okay.
Part of my training at JFK University was in magic, as in understanding psychic fraud.
Right.
And that was important for us to be, as researchers, to go forward with that. I actually hadn't done magic as a kid, but I loved magic and started doing it while I was bartending my way through graduate school. So
right. Okay.
making extra tips.
Yeah.
And then started performing first comedy magic. I actually performed in comedy clubs in quite a bit in the 1980s. And then Marcello Truzzi, who was kind of my mentor in some respects. He was a sociologist and a skeptic, but a true skeptic.
Yeah.
I got to know him very well. Also a psychic entertainer, mentalist. And he convinced me to move over from comedy magic to mentalism.
Okay.
Which is when I came up with the Professor Paranormal persona.
Right. Okay.
There was a major write-up of a reporter from a local paper followed me around for about a week in the early 2000s and ended up totally associating Professor Paranormal Mentalist with parapsychologist. And so it kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
So that's I still perform as Professor Paranormal, and obviously I am a professor of the paranormal. So
I love that. It's so varied, isn't it? That's brilliant. I love the parapsychology high school club as well. Loyd, for those listening who might be unsure, would you be able to please define parapsychology?
Well, parapsychology is the scientific study of psychic phenomena. Those are experiences people have and phenomena that we encounter that connect to consciousness. So we're talking here about extrasensory perception or picking up information without the use of the normal senses. It's non-sensory. It's not a sixth sense at all. It's perception. Psychokinesis, which is mind over matter, or the effect of the mind on the physical world. So whether it's our bodies or outside our bodies, it can be matter, energy, processes, things like that. And then one big area, which is one of the major areas that really got the SPR in Great Britain started, which is survival of bodily death.
Right. Okay.
And that's the idea that consciousness can survive the death of the body, and that there is evidence for that. Occurrences people run into from apparitional, which is the idea that people stick around after death and can communicate.
Yeah.
We have mediumship we look at. We look at reincarnation, mainly with children who remember previous lives, near-death experiences, all of that. So that's all kind of covered in here.
Okay, you teach a number of online courses at the Rhine Research Center. Could you tell us a bit more about your work there and why offering educational opportunities in this field is important?
Well, there's JFK University had the only master's program in parapsychology in the United States. And that program ended in the late 80s due to internal politics of the university, but also a loss of funding, a funding source. So there were, in the 60s and 70s, and even into the 80s, there were probably about 100 U.S. universities that had one or more courses in parapsychology, never a major, but they had quite a bit. Those started dropping off because of the activity of the organized skeptics movement back starting in the 1970s. They made it really, in the U.S. especially, it became, and it's lightened up a bit, but it became very dangerous career-wise for anyone to express an interest in the subject.
Right, okay.
With their departments.
Yeah.
I know one person who lost his job because of his interest. Others have been severely chastised or kind of made fun of. That's a big problem with the so-called they're not really skeptics.
Yeah.
So we were still teaching courses at JFK, one or two courses. JFK University, by the way, got folded into another university a couple of years ago. It doesn't exist anymore. But I was still teaching some parapsychology, and other people have as well, at a few places. I started actually teaching non-credit courses through an institute, a hypnotherapy institute here in the Bay Area, and got involved with the Rhine Center on the board. And the executive director who started up, John Kruth, who is the executive director today, felt it really necessary because they had so many requests, and I have had so many requests from people for learning about parapsychology and about psychic phenomena,
Mm.
that it made sense for the Rhine to start up an online school, the Rhine Education Center. That was around 2014 that we started that up. And since that time, and I have to tell you that COVID gave us a big increase in students.
Right. Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
The online. Yeah.
Yeah. The online, I mean, everybody started using Zoom.
Yeah.
Before that,
Yeah.
we had to give instructions to people on how to actually get into the class. So, people weren't used to that sort of thing. Now it's just second nature to everybody. So we have a steady flow of courses and some other instructors besides myself and John. We're hopefully going to be expanding at some point with more courses than we're currently offering.
Yeah.
So, and then we have certificate programs as well, which people have been taking, both in laboratory work and also in field work or investigation.
Fascinating.
So it's really opened up since COVID. People able to access the courses. That's great.
Yeah. When I was teaching at the local institute, I actually did distance classes also. So what I would do is have a speakerphone in the room, and students would call in and listen in on the lectures. That was the kind of the early way of doing it, kind of conference call type of thing. It was and I was getting students from all over the U.S. at that point.
Yeah.
Some folks were, so there clearly was an interest in this.
Yeah, definitely. If you don't mind, Loyd, if I could go back to your magic background.
Yeah.
I was a bit of a kind of a semi-pro magician as well, close up. And I kind of drifted into mentalism after watching people like Banachek and Darren Brown in his very, very early years. And I found an incredible amount of information very, very useful from the field of mentalism, but also from close-up magic. My main love was close-up card demonstrations and things like that, and sleight of hand with cards. But going over to the mentalism side, I did find a hell of a lot of it incredibly useful, as you've mentioned, with psychics and with mediums, and especially seeing a lot of the televised psychics and mediums and how they work, the constant talking, the constant questioning, the Barnum statements, things like that. Has it been a useful tool to you throughout your time in parapsychology and your investigations and your field research?
Well, first I'll say that getting into magic was kind of an eye-opener.
Yeah.
About understanding how people misperceive or mistake things that they experience in their normal lives. Honestly, I didn't get that much from the books. I got it from audience reactions and for performing.
Yeah.
And, I've known people in parapsychology who have a really good knowledge of magic, but they've never performed, and they're missing a big piece, which is that kind of understanding how people react to certain things and how they sometimes misremember things.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I can remember several shows that I did with some of my buddies in comedy clubs, and I'm coming off the stage and they'll say, that levitation you did was absolutely amazing. And no one did a levitation at all. So, and they were very serious. So, people make mistakes in their perceptions and their memories. And then getting into mentalism has been even more helpful in kind of spreading out. I had some understanding of mentalism. I had read it. I just hadn't been performing too much mentalism as part of my comedy act. I really kind of dove into the literature. I have a really good library of mentalism works right now. And thanks to Marcello Truzzi, I got into the Psychic Entertainers Association in 1997. And that in itself has been a really incredible journey for me. I still kind of like one of the meeting planners for the annual meeting, but I ended up as president of the association. I guess I'm the only parapsychologist who's ever been president of a mentalist association.
Fantastic.
In that sense, which is, and every year I do an update on parapsychology for the psychic entertainers that come to our meeting. It's the knowledge base has helped me in working with psychics. It's helped me in working just with average people in investigations, because one of the things that we do in investigations is look for the normal explanation for each and every reported event and experience before we'll even say that the case is paranormal.
Yeah.
And of course, almost all the cases, not all, but almost all of them have a mix. If somebody has an experience, let's say they see what they think is a ghost, they may be on edge, may be afraid, And now every little thing that happens in their house that they may never have noticed before suddenly becomes part
Of that.
of that ghost.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have to figure that out. And it really does sometimes take a magician mentalist to figure some of that out. It also can sometimes take an engineer, somebody who knows a building structure, a plumber, an electrician. We have to bring people in from that role as well.
Right. Have you actually got to the stage in many of your cases where you have come across something and you have edged towards a paranormal explanation for it? You have kind of sifted through so much, I suppose, real world explanations that you've dismissed and got rid of, and it's kind of the Sherlock Holmes things, however impossible have you ever got any of those cases where you have, that's not the only thing, but you have steered towards possible paranormal explanation?
So my paranormal casebook, for example, has a number of some of the really good cases where there wasn't, there was other stuff that we were able to eliminate, but it was unrelated to the actual phenomena itself. And that the most likely explanation from a parapsychological perspective was either an apparition, a haunting, poltergeist. I've had some poltergeist cases where I've seen things moving. One apparition case at a relatively local bar restaurant, with physical activity that was going on quite a bit, and it was definitely not a normal explanation, let's put it that way. Combined with witness testimony and people who didn't even know the individual when he was alive, being able to pick him out from a lineup of pictures. So we have combinations of, I certainly have a number of cases that absolutely positively are legitimate from a paranormal perspective. They are rarely ever harmful, except maybe from a psychological perspective. So there's a lot of misconception about that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But I've also had my paranormal casebook also has a couple of cases in there that were absolutely not paranormal, although the people thought they were. And one in particular where there were so many wrong things about the house and environment that were outside the normal experience of the average resident, that I don't know how they could have concluded it was anything but paranormal, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we have to really look into these things.
Because you talk about there's 3 different types of hauntings. There's apparitions, poltergeist.
And what people call residual hauntings, but we just call them hauntings. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the apparition one is the most intriguing in a way, isn't it? Because I guess it suggests some kind of consciousness. Have you ever encountered an apparition, or in your work, in your investigation?
Yeah. Certainly had a number of cases. I have a couple of long-running cases. One is a restaurant south of San Francisco called the Moss Beach Distillery, which has had apparitional activity since the 1930s. Many, many witnesses. I've had interaction myself with her in some unusual ways, and some physical activity, although that's been pretty rare. And I have worked with several really, really good vetted psychics or mediums, and especially at that place, I've gotten some really good information about our communication in certain circumstances. And then we have another case called it's the USS Hornet Aircraft Carrier Museum, where there are well over 100 witnesses, sometimes multiple at the same time, seeing sailors and officers who sort of react to them. They don't necessarily interact, but they do react. Okay. As well. Yeah. And those are a couple of really good ones. We really, really do have to kind of look at things in a truly skeptical way. I call myself a situational skeptic. Yeah. I do believe in the phenomena. I do believe that these things are real in human experience, and that there's an objective reality to much of it. But when I go into a case, I have to skeptically look at each of the events. Again, each of the reported experiences or events. And when people tell me their psychic experiences, sometimes they're not psychic. Sometimes they actually have normal explanations. And even though I'm probably disappointing them sometimes, I try to give them some clarity in what's going on.
Has that ever happened where, it presents itself, a case, as very unusual, very odd, very creepy, but you could find an everyday explanation for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you two examples. One of them was kind of funny because it was footsteps from somebody's attic.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be a squirrel rolling nuts across a very rough floor, and the acoustics
Brilliant.
of the attic literally amplified it. So in the attic, it sounded like little thumps because I was in the attic when the squirrel was doing it. And down below, it sounded like footsteps.
Yeah.
So that was sometimes it's really weird acoustics. It's very, I know a colleague of mine actually had a case where this woman was hearing noises in the wall and bangs and all sorts of things. Turned out to be a possum in the wall. Although she did not believe that was the cause of the phenomena. He showed her the possum. He caught it. She didn't want to let that one go. But I had this case I mentioned that had a variety of different experiences. It was a house where people were experiencing, number one, there was a room where they felt weird and dizzy. They were getting headaches in the house from time to time. They were seeing balls of fire occasionally pop up in midair with things.
Oh, wow.
They'd see shadows out of the corner of their eyes. There are a number of things that were going on. And it turned out, first of all, that when we got there, the house was a one-level house. It was sort of an experimental design. They were using, the guy who built it was an architecture professor and was using, unfortunately, building materials that cause enormous static electricity, especially given that the building was directly under high tension power lines, which were giving off not only high frequency sound, but a low frequency hum,
Right.
which can cause your eyes to vibrate and cause you to see shadows out of the corner of your eyes.
But infrasound.
So that was a piece there.
Yeah.
The house was slightly off its cinder block foundation. There was no basement.
Yeah.
And the room right above where it was slightly off the foundation was not exactly level. And the windows and doors were not exactly 90 degrees. Now, our perceptions kind of our brain makes us see them as 90 degrees because that's what we like to see. But when we measured them, I just use a level, carpenter's level, and a protractor to show this. We felt dizzy there because there was something wrong about the room. It was not right physically. Then it turned out that because they did have burn marks in a few places from these supposed little tiny balls of fire, the house was on the other side of the hill from a landfill. Methane gas was seeping up through the ground, and occasionally, because of the static electricity, was catching on fire.
I mean,
so we had this combination.
Wow.
Huge and this is a case, like I said, I don't know how these people would, under normal circumstances, without knowing any of these extra things, could have come up to any other conclusion.
I mean, that's an extraordinary explanation as well, isn't it? As much as a paranormal one.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. Yeah, I like to say it's normal, but often unusual explanation.
Yeah, it reminds me, Marie, of the episode we did on paranormal fire starters.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, especially with the methane gas.
They had also mentioned noxious odors, and there was a hill right behind the place, and looking on going to the top of the hill, you could see the landfill. So.
One thing that I do want to ask you as well, Loyd, is I was on a ghost hunt not too long ago at Dudley Castle. It's a good 1,000 years of history there. How would you describe the difference between a field investigation and a ghost hunt?
Well, I tend to think of a ghost hunt as something touristy and fun, not any sort of actual investigation.
Entertainment.
Yeah. With an investigation, you need to talk to, one of the things that I see missing from most of the TV shows, and actually most of the ghost hunting groups, is that you really don't spend time talking to witnesses.
Yeah.
They also don't consider that if there's no one who's had an experience in the location for a few years, maybe it's not haunted anymore. Maybe it was, but first of all, if there was an apparition there, the apparitions don't always stay. They move on. We're not sure exactly where to or how they move on, but sometimes they move out, leave the place altogether. So you have to look for current activity, reports of current activity, and preferably people you can talk to, because unless you know what's being experienced, you have no starting point. Unless you have, of course, just a ghost story. That might be the starting. And for a historical location, I think there are ghost stories that kind of float around. But it really boils down to us going in and from the witness testimony and finding out where they had the experiences in the location, when they had them. We look for patterns, and using those experiences and patterns, we look, number one, for normal explanations.
Yeah.
And then we look to whether the patterns actually fit what we have been studying for over 100 years, and try to figure out if there's a way to detect or infer that this is really going on. So
Yeah.
we will use the tools we use, which ghost hunters use. We use them as environmental sensors, which is what they're designed for.
Yeah.
And we're looking to see whether there's any difference in the environment when people have an experience
Yeah.
and when people don't. That's an important factor right there. There should be some change in the environment of some kind, which itself can generate, depending on the change in the environment, that could cause people to think the place is haunted.
Yeah.
So we're looking for that as well. And then, I personally have worked with and tend to use psychics and mediums as additional sensors, because I can actually ask them questions, and I can't do that with a trifield meter or an EMF meter.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it, with involving your psychic, being able to ask questions.
Yeah, and I also just want to say that you can't really apply much of the scientific method to an investigation, because you are not in control of the environment. What you can do, however, is apply the science and the findings of the scientific method in parapsychology, looking at psychic phenomena. We can apply that to an investigation. And so in many respects, field investigations are applied science.
Yeah, no, it is. No, I think I would feel really safe confiding in you, Loyd, if I thought I was experiencing something paranormal in my home. I think you'd have a real measured and reassuring response, and I think you'd make it seem less scary. What if someone did contact you and said, "Oh, I think my home is haunted," so it's their home? What would be the first bit of advice that you would give them?
Well, first, I want to ask them a couple of questions to try to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
Because if it's purely physical, it's likely what we call, what we in the U.S. term a poltergeist. In the U.K., I know my colleagues in the U.K., we use poltergeist for any case where there's things moving around, whether there is an apparition or not.
Okay.
Here, we call it a poltergeist or recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis.
Yeah.
If there's no apparition, no haunting experience, just the physical stuff. So my reaction, in fact, I've got a guy right now who's got a lot of physical activity around his electronics.
Yeah.
And it's most likely coming from him.
Right. Okay.
That's what we found. If they are seeing a figure, if they are feeling weird, like negative feelings or energy in the place, in a spot, if, I'll try to find out if there's been a figure that has appeared, an apparition, and whether they get a sense that the apparition is reacting to them, or if it's just something that they're seeing kind of coming through, to separate from the recording type, the residual stuff, and the apparition thing. So if it's just right off the bat, one of the things I'll say, look, next time you see the apparition, I want you to face the apparition, the figure, and ask them, who are you? Why are you here? And what can I do for you? That is, most people react like, you want me to talk to the ghost? Yeah. Because once we know who they are, why they're here, and whether there's anything we can do, there's a lot more that can be done. And if they don't react in any way, shape, or form, and I mean, if they don't even look at you crazy, change their expression, the odds are it's a residual haunting, in which case we can work with them differently there.
How do you expect the apparition to react to those questions?
Well, it really depends on when I've had people do this. In one case, I remember the apparition looked shocked and apparently went away. Okay. And never came back. So that could be a way of getting rid of ghosts, I guess.
Yeah. Talk to them.
In other cases, what they've seen is the apparition stops whatever they were doing, will try to talk to them. Now, unfortunately, to pick up an apparition at all, apparitions are not visual. In other words, they're not being seen with our eyes. They're being seen with our, if you want to call them psychic senses, with our ESP.
Yeah.
So some people will hear the voice of an apparition rather than see an apparition. And then there are cases of smell, olfactory apparitions. So what I would say to folks is, or in these cases, if the apparition can speak, or you can pick up what they're saying, or if they can give you a signal of anything, pay attention to that and let me know what it is, and we'll see what we can do next. But in other cases, the apparition has reacted. In one case I know of, the apparition got very frustrated. They said that he looked like he was talking to them, but they couldn't hear anything. Okay. So there was a bit of frustration in that connection. So we brought in a medium and had a good communication, and we're able to verify who the person was. Right. Somebody who didn't die, too long before.
That's amazing.
In other cases, they get actual information.
Yeah. So it's just communicating, talking to the ghost. or the spirit.
Yeah, and well, you have to look at apparitions as ghosts of people too. They were
Yeah.
living people, so trying to treat them as human beings makes the most sense.
Mm.
The thing that bothers me most about some of the ghost hunting shows and some of the groups is they try to provoke stuff.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they get a negative, like get out or some negative experience after they've been yelling at the ghost for a while.
Yeah.
Now they immediately label that ghost of demon when in fact they were the ones who were acting kind of demonically.
Absolutely. Do you think it's quite rare to have an evil spirit?
Yes. Yeah. Because I think it's very rare to have an evil person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, there are bullies and, a-holes.
Yeah.
that
Absolutely.
So I can't say that they're all going to be nice,
but they are people.
They really,
yeah,
they are people.
So, you're saying a haunting from someone is a poltergeist? Would that be your definition of a poltergeist? Then it's
right,
from the person.
Right. So when there's physical activity,
and
it's purely physical, what we have seen is it's for the most part unconscious psychokinesis, unconscious mind over matter, usually related to stress. Although Bill Roll and Jerry Salfin did a survey and study of, I think it was 102 poltergeist agents, and found that there was either epilepsy or temporal lobe epileptic-like activity in the brain, and that Roll proposed that some of these cases might actually be neurological.
Okay.
In fact, in some of the cases that have been studied, another colleague of mine, Barry Taff, has done studies on this. People who were epileptic, who were having these experiences, the physical activity, it was really interesting because the entire period of this physical activity, they did not have a seizure, and they went off their seizure medication.
Wow.
So Barry and someone else proposed that maybe the poltergeist activity was actually the seizure, was the brainstorm. This was going outward instead of inward.
That's so interesting. Can I ask you as well what you think about mimics? I find that quite intriguing because they're often linked to poltergeists, aren't they? People hear a voice.
You're talking about a voice that mimics their voice?
Yeah, or someone else in the house. We get a lot of stories about mimics. I guess they're not linked to poltergeists, but
well, one of the things about residual hauntings is that the idea of a residual haunting or haunting is that information is imprinted in the environment. It is imprinted by living people. It's not the case that when someone sees a repetitive pattern, let's say somebody walking down the hall and into a room or up and down stairs, it's not the case that figure has to necessarily be representative of somebody who's dead.
Yeah.
And hauntings can also be auditory. In fact, a lot of times they are. The footsteps people sometimes hear in their homes are actually recordings, you might say, as opposed to actual ghosts. So because they can be auditory, they can be vocal, they can be voices, they can be smells sometimes, but most of the time it's auditory and visual. And it's living people who leave those behind. Most often, actually, hauntings are emotional.
Right, yeah.
That you feel the emotions of a place. I mean, people do that when they go house hunting.
Yeah.
So it's the living people who leave that impression behind. And sometimes it's the people living in the house. That's who left the recordings, meaning there have been cases reported to me, experiences where people came home after hours, they turn on one light, they look down the hall, they see a figure walking towards them, and then that figure more or less comes into the light and disappears. And they're really freaked out because they saw themselves.
Wow. That is fascinating. There's so much about the universe that I just feel like that's just the surface of it. It's fascinating.
I think with the hauntings, I think that's probably the phenomena, residual stuff, we probably would have a better chance of understanding first. Because it seems to be, it's environmental connected. It's connected to us, either our brains or our consciousness. And there may be some connection to the geomagnetic field because we've seen some really interesting correlations there, also to magnetic fields in general, which we use, of course, in recording information.
Yeah.
We use that in technology. We use magnetic tape. We use magnetic media. So there is something to be said that there might be some correlation to us. And the problem is that, of course, no one outside of the field of parapsychology wants to study this.
Yeah.
Because it's taboo, because they can't get funding for it. And there's not enough of us within the field that are really interested in doing a scientific study or have the capacity to get funding for a true study of hauntings in general. Most of my colleagues, in order to get funding, I mean, they're doing laboratory work, but not on this particular topic.
Coming back to Barry Taff, sorry.
Yeah.
Was Barry Taff involved in the Entity case?
Yes, he and Kerry Gaynor were the two investigators on the Entity case, which was not what the movie or the book.
No.
Yeah. I actually got to speak. This is back when the movie first came out. I had a long conversation with the author of the book, Frank DiFelita.
Yeah.
And he talked to me and he told me about how much he fictionalized. So, and I know Barry pretty well, and I know what went on. He's written it up in a couple of places as well.
Yeah. I think that was a danger, obviously, with one of the most famous ones, which was Amityville, which was a mixture of, well, the Warrens, a mixture of too much wine and an author.
Well, yeah. And I have no problem. I know one of the Lutz kids has talked about having experiences, but nothing like what was in the book.
No. And
it makes sense to me that there would be like an imprint of the murders, of the killings.
Of course, yeah. With that much negative energy.
Yeah, I could see. In fact, we had a psychic when I was at the ASPR in New York. The research director, Carlos Osis, and the psychic we worked with, Alex Tanis, had told me that they had gone into the Amityville case before the Warrens. In fact, they were finishing up their investigation of the house when the Warrens came in with a TV crew.
Fascinating. Okay.
And Alex actually was who worked with police, FBI, and others. He picked up on, where things happened in the house. He also found a book contract in a drawer, which was really interesting considering the family had already moved out and all that was going on. So they felt there may have been feelings, the imprint, nothing like what was in the book. And the Warrens, of course, just made a big deal about it.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
As they did with almost everything else.
Yeah. I was just going to mention the Enfield poltergeist, which is probably our most famous one over in the UK.
Right.
They kind of got involved in that. I think we did a bit of an in-depth triple episode about it. I wanted desperately to believe that there were things going on in the Enfield house, and I do genuinely believe that something was in there in that house at the very beginning. But I do feel that the two lead investigators, Maurice Grosse and
Guy Lyon Playfair,
I do think, in a sense, they wanted more out of it than anybody else. And I do think in some ways they tried to push it further than it needed to go, instead of maybe stepping back and kind of not leaving the family alone, but like a typical example was when Janet was Janet was allegedly levitating. None of them ever saw it. The door was always closed and no one was allowed in and things like. I do believe that something was in there, but I just think it was taken too far. And with the media speculation, and I think Maurice Grosse did take it. I think he desperately wanted it to be more than it was. Again, whatever your opinion is on that, Loyd.
No, I think that's always a danger we have to kind of have to look at. I have had to revise some of my thinking about a couple of cases in the past, the public places, because I've gotten more information after the fact. So, sometimes when more information comes in, we have to go back and change that's how science should be working, actually.
Of course, yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's open to criticism, isn't it? And it's open to revision all the time, which it should be. Yeah, as you say, it should be. Right, well, thank you so much for coming on today, Loyd. We really do appreciate it. And I've got to be honest, with the dream stuff, and especially the cases that you've investigated, I could keep you on here for hours and hours. We just can't thank you enough. So, Loyd, could you give us a few pointers of where people can get hold of you, your YouTube channels and websites and things like that, where they can find your work? Yeah,
my website is simply LoydAuerbach.com, and it is Loyd with one L. So if you don't spell it right, you won't get there. That it's my author site, and it's actually brand new. I just launched it last month, but that has contact information for me, including email, as well as a lot of links to previous podcasts. In fact, when I get the link for this one, I'll put it up there as well in the media section.
Oh, thank you very much.
There are links to my YouTube channels. I actually do an every other week live Q&A on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@AskProfessorParanormal.
Okay.
It is a little late in the UK because it's 8:30 Eastern time. So I communicate with folks. I've had a few people from the UK stay up Otherwise, people can watch the replays, which are available under the live tab. So they're all available for streaming. And I have a media page, which is youtube.com/Loyd Auerbach, which has a lot of my TV appearances.
Brilliant.
And if you want to check out a couple of lectures, I have lectures on my prof. It's youtube.com/Prof Paranormal.
Fantastic. We would love to have you back on if you would come on in the future, Loyd, because there's so much more that I would personally love to go deeper into with yourself. It's been absolutely fascinating. Really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
And we really value the work that you do as well, and the standards that you set in your investigations and research, and no doubt will have a legacy and be a guide for decades to come as well. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you,
Loyd. Take care.